Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and I'm presenting here the audio version of my book, Profile of the Disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Now, this book I put out in 2011. It's a very short book, but it is the profile that I did analyzing all the evidence in the Madeleine McCann case. That book I have updated for 2024. Adding in new information and what has happened in the recent years. And so the new updated version, you can, if you click on the description below, you'll find a link that will send you to Smashwords where you can buy the print version, well, the download version. It's $2.99. You can also find that on Kobo, Barnes, a whole lot of other places, but not on Amazon. Why not on Amazon? Because Amazon had the book removed. They removed the book because the McCanns got their attorneys, Carter Ruck, to claim that it was libelous. And so Amazon pulled the book so they didn't have to deal with a libel case. But that's the only place it was removed from. But the link below will take you to Smashwords. And again, you can find it on Apple, Kobo, lots of other places as well. So this is the new version, the updated 2024 version of Profile of the Disappearance of Madeleine McCann. But I also decided I should present to you an audio version. Some people prefer that. So here it's going to be on YouTube, available to you. It is obviously free, so that's a savings. But I do say that it would be nice if you subscribe to the channel and support the book in that way. And I will very much look forward to your comments below. I will say this about the audio version. It is a straight through reading of the book. I don't like editing. It drives me crazy. And actually, when you try to read your own book, it's pretty grueling. And a lot of times, if you do it professionally, it takes just an incredibly long time because every time you make a sound or you stutter or you mispronounce something or you miss a word, they stop you and then you have to repeat it. And I've done at least two of my books I've done the audio for professionally, and it was quite a chore. And I just didn't have the energy to quite do it to that level here. So what you're going to get is me reading my book. And there's going to be a few little baubles here and there. And sorry about that, but I just don't have the energy to go through a very grueling editing process. So you get what you get. So I'm reading the book. I hope you enjoy it and learn something from it. And I say you can always go and also get the copy, which you can then read it. Some people find it's easier to understand all of the details as far as, especially in the Madeleine McCann case, the timelines of when there were checks being made on the children and all that. Can get a little overwhelming. But so you can always read it. But here you will hear it and you can always go back and just move back and listen to it again if you get confused. But I do hope you learn something from this. This is my analysis. As I have always said over and over again, a profile is an opinion. It's not a declaration that anyone is guilty. So this is just a theory. It is my theory based on evidence, as much as I find that in the analysis of all the evidence that I am coming up with the best theory possible. There's a lot of theories out there that are pretty crazy and they're full of conspiracies and all that. I do not go that direction as a criminal profiler. I focus strictly on the evidence. But I also try to explain this evidence to you so you can understand why I'm coming up with the conclusions that I'm coming up with. I want to make it something that makes sense. And so I hope you find that in this profile. Again, here it is, and comment below, and please do subscribe to the channel. And thank you very much. Profile of the Disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Disclaimer. It is important for me to emphasize the following profile is a theory based on presently available public information. It is also important to note that determinations made in this profile do not assign guilt or innocence to any party, nor are these determinations to be misinterpreted as facts as opposed to opinions. Any profile is meant to be a tool to further investigative avenues and not as a document of probable cause. Also, I would like to advise readers of this profile that this document is a public profile, not a for law enforcement only profile, as would be produced if I were working with a police department. Furthermore, I have written it in a style that is quite different. I am taking the reader through my thinking process in a much less formal manner, showing how I come to certain conclusions, or how I arrive at places where I feel there are still questions to be answered or evidence to be obtained. It is my hope that this public profile will inspire any investigative agency working on the disappearance of Madeleine Beth McCann to consider the issues I have brought up within. I also hope that the McCanns, Kate and Jerry, consider addressing areas of concern that could make a difference in finding Madeleine or in excluding themselves as suspects. I hope that, if friends and family of the McCanns have information that would be useful in solving this case, they work with police agencies to see that Madeleine is found and or justice is served. Finally, I hope this public profile might bring forth any witnesses or persons who have pertinent information, perhaps something they previously did not realize was important, so that this case can finally receive closure. As this is the 2024 updated version of the book written in 2011, much has happened that make my public profile less likely to have impact on any investigation. However, even if no one comes forward with a confession, nor is Madeleine's body recovered, it is my hope that this profile might help people understand the crime and the most logical conclusions. Note, as there is a massive amount of information on this case, both in book form and on the internet, I am not going to footnote every bit of information. I will state that I am using information from the police files, televised interviews, Kate McCann's book Madeleine, and Gonzalo Amaral's book The Truth of the Lie, translated, and the documentary translated based on it. At the end of this profile, I have listed books and internet sites under references, where those interested in verifying the information in this profile or learning more about the case can do more research and reading for themselves. I also assume that most of you reading this profile are very familiar with the Madeleine McCann case and have a good stock of knowledge about it already. For this reason, I'm going to cut to the chase and present this profile and not offer an entire book about the McCanns, the disappearance, and the aftermath. All of this is well documented in the places I have listed under references. Part 1, Introduction. Basic rules for profiling crimes and people. Before we delve into what happened in Praia da Luz to Madeleine Beth McCann on or about May 3, 2007, I want to review some basic rules for profiling crimes and the people connected to them, whether as perpetrators, witnesses, friends or family, even media and police. Everyone has their own agenda, which is based, a good portion of the time, on selfish needs far more than altruistic motives. People want to protect themselves, their loved ones, their livelihoods, their reputations, and their own self-image. This is true for all human beings, and certain behaviors may be the result of self-preservation or ignorance and must be distinguished from the more manipulative and narcissistic traits that make up certain personality disorders: borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and psychopathy. However, even personality disorders have a bit of a continuum from mild to extreme, so it can be difficult to come to a proper interpretation of human behavior without an in-depth analysis of such behaviors and personality traits over time. As a deductive criminal profiler looking at the McCann case from outside the investigation and without full access to all records and without an extremely long period of time to review and review again every shred of information and evidence, conduct interviews, and further investigate all the facts pertaining to the crime and those connected to it, I can only offer a profile based on public records and public statements. But it is my hope that I can inspire deeper analysis and encourage a further look at certain theories and questions that I will be raising in this analysis. So where does one start with a profile, and what do we need to keep in mind? First, that people behave in a manner which makes sense to them, even if it doesn't to us. We need to learn as much as possible about their personalities, their behavior pre- and post-crime, and the facts as to what actually occurred. All available evidence, including physical, forensic, behavioral statements, and public communications, can be analyzed. And from all of this, I develop a theory. Not proof of exactly what happened, but as good a theory as possible. It is absolutely important to remember that a theory can be scientifically developed, but unless a theory then is investigated further and sufficient evidence leads to a trial in a courtroom and voted on by a jury or judge, the proposed possible suspects in a crime are not legally guilty of any crime. They are just persons of interest in this profiler's view. Other theories may propose different suspects or persons of interest, and these people also are not guilty of a crime unless they are convicted in a court of law. This present profile is my theory of what happened to Madeleine McCann, not a conviction of any particular person. The next important point to remember is that people tend to do what is easiest and most expedient. If a crime can be committed simply or covered up simply, the perpetrator is unlikely to conjure up some Hollywood scenario of a mastermind criminal. They will do what is necessary, lie where it is necessary, and change a story to what they now think is necessary if new evidence doesn't back the previous story or if they feel their last story is not being believed. And this applies not only to perpetrators of crimes, but even to victims and to witnesses, unless someone is seeking attention and fabricating a story they believe will be bought by the people they are trying to impress with it. A third principle is that certain things must have happened and certain things couldn't have happened. If it did happen, we can't ignore this evidence. And if it didn't happen, we can't ignore that either. If we have conflicting evidence, then we cannot know what happened until we can eliminate one piece of evidence as wrong or prove the other piece of evidence as right. Sometimes we have to accept we may not know what happened and never will in respect to one part of a crime or its entirety. On the other hand, not understanding one piece of a crime does not invalidate everything else, although a defense attorney will try to convince a jury of this in court. It doesn't matter, he will insist, that the defendant was seen running from the victim's home at the time of the crime with a bloody knife in his hand, shouting, "Ha ha, the bitch is dead." If there is some DNA present on the victim's body that is not from the defendant, then that fellow must be innocent. But this is not necessarily true. Maybe the victim just had sex with a guy she picked up, and that guy is not about to come forward and admit he was with the victim right before she ended up dead. It is a frustrating fact that in many crimes there is some unexplained piece of evidence. And if 20 other pieces of evidence all point to one person, though, in one scenario, this should be enough to feel comfortable drawing the conclusion that the person is the one who did the deed. This is called the totality of evidence, and in court should lead a jury or judge to find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Finally, the closer anything is to the time of the crime, the better the evidence tends to be. This includes the first statements of any persons of interest or witnesses, the 911 calls, the phone calls to family and friends, and any evidence that is fresh at the crime scene. The time of the crime is when the least planning has taken place, emotions are raw, and people make mistakes. Later, with time to think, evidence can be disposed of and stories can be, quote, improved, or people can get together and make sure the stories contain the same, quote, facts. It is important to note, though, sometimes when at a second or third interview there are more specific questions asked, the interviewee can stumble trying to answer. A good interviewer or interrogator may elicit solid information if he knows how to get it. With these basic concepts in mind, let's proceed to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Part 2. The disappearance. Note for the audio version. As there are Portuguese words in here I cannot pronounce, and if I butcher them, please do forgive. Gerald, and Kate McCann, also known as Kate Healy, and their children, Madeleine, age 3, and the twins, Sean and Amelie, age 2, went to Praia da Luz in Portugal on vacation with 7 friends, often called the Tapas 7, and together with the McCanns, the Tapas 9. But I will refrain from using that terminology in this profile. The friends consist of David and Fiona Payne and the daughters, Lily, age 2, and Scarlett, age 1, and Fiona's mother, Diana Webster. Matthew Oldfield and Rachel Mampoli and their daughter Grace, aged 19 months, and Russell O'Brien and Jane Tanner and their daughters Ella, age 3, and Evie, age 1. They stayed at the Ocean Club, a resort owned by the Mark Warner resort chain. Each family got an apartment in the complex. During the days, the children were cared for in the creche, nursery, and in the evenings, the children were left unattended in the apartments while the parents had dinner and drinks at the Tapas restaurant. The back of the apartments had sliding glass doors facing the Tapas restaurant with a swimming pool between the complex and the restaurant. The front doors were facing a car park and the road with a high wall in front of them. The bedroom of Madeleine and her siblings had a window that was next to the front door facing the road. The apartment is about 70 meters from the Tapas restaurant as the crow flies, but one can only see the balcony of the apartment from that distance and not the sliding patio doors. Also, there was a rather opaque enclosure around the Tapas restaurant, which further prevented one from seeing anything going on at the apartments. When the McCanns and their friends spent time at the Tapas, they said they made checks on their children regularly, 15 to 30 minutes apart, having one parent of the couple, except David and Fiona Payne, who relied strictly on a child monitor they brought to the restaurant with them, walk over to the apartment. This would mean one would walk about 60 meters out of the restaurant, go around the pool and out the security gate to the Rua Dr. Francisco Gentil Martins, and then walk another 60 meters up the hill. At this point, one would have arrived at the gate of the corner apartment in which the McCanns were staying. If one went in that gate and up the steps, the back patio sliding doors of the apartment could be accessed. At least until the last night, so it is claimed, when Madeleine disappeared, all the parents would walk to that point and then continue around the corner to the front side of the apartments on the Rua Dr. Augustina and go in the locked front doors. On May 3, 2007, the McCanns and their friends continued with their evening routine, going to the Tapas restaurant and leaving their children unattended in their apartments. It is stated the parties arrived between 8:30 and 9 p.m., and during their time in the restaurant, checks were made on the children at varied times. As for the McCanns, it is claimed Jerry checked around 9:10 p.m., Matt checked for Kate at 9:30 p.m., and at 10 p.m., when Kate went to do her check, Madeleine was missing from the apartment. At 10:40, the police were called. An investigation ensued that is focused on Madeleine being abducted and on the alternative theory, the McCanns and their friends were covering up a tragic accident resulting from neglect. The PJ, the Policia Judiciaria, which I will definitely use the term PJ from now on, interviewed the McCanns and their friends in May. In September, the McCanns became arguidos, suspects, after sniffer dogs indicated Madeleine's body had lain in the McCanns' apartment and been transported in their rental car, along with a lack of physical evidence of an intruder and concerning answers and behaviors. Jerry did one interview as an arguido, but Kate refused to answer questions. Then they left the country of Portugal. At the request of the PJ, the McCanns' friends were interviewed in the UK by British law enforcement. But the McCanns did not submit to any more interviews with the police of either country. 13 years has passed at the updating of my 2011 original profile, which was pulled from Amazon due to the McCanns threatening the company with a libel suit via their attorneys Carter Ruck. Kate McCann published a book called Madeleine, which was very useful in writing my profile. She requested at that point a review by Scotland Yard, which was launched as Operation Grange in 2011, with the remit that the disappearance of Madeleine McCann only be investigated as an abduction. The McCanns and their friends were not re-interviewed. In 2024, at the time of writing this updated profile, nothing much has changed barring the emergence of Christian Bruckner, a sex predator in jail in Germany that is being touted as the person who abducted and murdered Madeleine McCann. There is, as of yet, no evidence linking him to the crime that has been made public or been proven. Part 3. What day and from where did Madeleine go missing? The first place to start in profiling a crime is to determine when and where the crime took place. From all accounts and from all analyses I have seen to date, there seems to be a fairly good consensus that Madeleine went missing on the evening of May 3rd, 2007 and from the McCann's resort apartment at the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz. I know there are those who speculate that Madeleine went missing the day before, on May 2nd, or even earlier in the week, and from who knows where, that photographs prior to May 3rd may have been photoshopped, and that the records at the creche are not accurate or are forged. I could discuss every reason for why each of these contentions I feel are incorrect, but I will point out one of the rules above, that people do what is easiest and simplest in an effort to cover up following an unintentional homicide. If Madeleine went missing on May 2nd or earlier, the McCanns and their friends would have to orchestrate and manage a very long and complicated period of time where they would have to fake Madeleine being alive, create evidence to prove her existence, and act in a normal fashion for a family on vacation. They would have to pretend Madeleine was alive an extra day or days and that she attended the creche and spent time with other children at the resort. This would require forging signatures and getting the cooperation of the nanny at the creche. Taking a chance that the police would discover that Madeleine was not out and about on May 3rd, and to depend on a young college girl to lie to the police on their behalf is also very risky. This is also the reason why they would not involve anyone at the church to bless Madeleine's body or to help with anything else. This would be one or two more people to be involved in lying to the police. All of this is a lot of work and so unnecessary. Therefore, it is not likely to have happened. Should Madeleine have come to some accidental death or unplanned death on the day before presumed, the McCanns could have come up with a simpler plan to explain her disappearance at that very time. For example, Kate could say she took the children for an early morning stroll, and in a moment when the twins distracted her, someone grabbed Madeleine. Or they could say someone had accessed the apartment through the children's bedroom window while they were sleeping, especially if they can use alcohol as an excuse for sleeping heavily and hearing nothing. These scenarios have been offered many a time when a parent wants to cover a crime in which they killed their own child. Because it can be difficult to prove an abduction didn't occur unless evidence points to the parent not being truthful, this is the simplest claim to make and the easiest choice for staging a crime. The McCanns did not offer these scenarios prior to May 3rd. On May 3rd, the claim was made that Madeleine had been abducted via the bedroom window while they were at the restaurant. The other most compelling evidence to me that Madeleine went missing on May 3rd during the time the McCanns and friends were dining at the tapas restaurant is the reaction of Kate McCann at discovering Madeleine missing at 10 p.m. I have read through all the statements of the friends, the employees of the resort, Kate's book Madeleine, and observed early videos of her behavior. As a profiler, I find Kate's behavior around 10 p.m. on the evening of May 3rd to be absolutely genuine. She did not find her child in the room, and she was panicked and horrified and beside herself with panic and fear. She was not putting on an act. Likewise, I do not believe Jerry McCann was putting on an act either upon his discovery that his daughter was, quote, gone. I believe he was indeed distraught and devastated. The police described two rather bizarre moments, one in which Jerry prostrates himself before them in the manner of wailing like an Arab, and a later incident in the apartment bedroom of the McCanns in which both parents are kneeling on the floor, arms and heads down on the bed, praying and crying. Although the reasons for Kate and Jerry acting in such a fashion can be debated, I will discuss my views on this later in the profile. These are behaviors of two people I believe to be in absolute anguish. Due to the very real emotions exhibited around and after 10 p.m., I do not believe the McCanns could have had something happen to Madeleine before they left for their restaurant or the night before, done something with her body, and then gone out for the evening, pretended all was well, and then have Kate feign shock at finding her gone. To recap, I believe the evidence, especially the behavioral evidence, points to Madeleine going missing on the evening of May 3rd and during the time the McCanns and their friends were dining at the tapas restaurant. Determinations so far. 1. Madeleine went missing on May 3rd, 2007. 2. Madeleine went missing between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening. 3. The emotions of Kate and Jerry McCann were real. Part 4. When was the last time Madeleine was seen alive? Now the first gray area arrives. What time were the children put to bed? Who saw them last? Were they sleeping? And when did the McCanns actually leave the residence? Until the McCanns were officially seen at the tapas by their friends and somewhere around 8:30 p.m., we only have the McCanns' word for it, that they were in the apartment and that they, or one of them, saw the children in their beds just minutes before that time. In Jerry's first statement on May 4th, it is written, he stated that Madeleine and the twins were put to bed in their respective beds, and he stresses put to bed at 7:30 p.m. The deponent and his wife remained in the apartment to relax and drink a glass of wine until 8:30 p.m. After checking the children, the deponent and his wife and the adults went to the tapas restaurant. Kate says almost the identical thing on May 4th, with the exception of adding some extra activities of her own before drinking that glass of wine, and she adds a specific kind, with her husband. Kate relates that Madeleine and the twins went into the bedroom and were put in their beds around 7:30. The witness and her husband stayed in the apartment relaxing until 8:30 p.m. She took a bath, did her makeup, and drank a glass of New Zealand wine with her husband. Just after 8:30 p.m., the witness and her husband, after checking on their children, joined the other group of adults at the tapas restaurant. Jerry's first interview was at 11:15 a.m., while Kate's was at 2:20 p.m. Kate mentions in her diary that Jerry was allowed to sit in on her interview, in a chair behind her, actually squeezing her shoulder at times, supposedly as a comforting gesture. This is a mistake on the part of the police, as it allows a possible suspect to know what the other has revealed and allows for them to influence the interview. Also, there was a period of downtime between Jerry's and Kate's interview, during which time, unless they were kept apart, Jerry could inform Kate of what questions were asked and how he answered them. This is poor police procedure, which can damage the investigation. Likewise, it is important to separate everyone as soon as possible before they have the chance to get their stories in order. This clearly was not done, as the entire tapas group and Jerry and Kate had the whole evening and early morning to discuss the matter. If the perpetrators are within the group, they can manipulate the others to provide the proper alibi and details to support their innocence. And allowing a group discussion prior to separate interviews is also a bad idea, because this group effort could cause an innocent person to appear guilty of conspiring with others to put out a particular story when that actually did not happen. In the second set of interviews on May 10th, Jerry's story about the time they spent just before heading out for the evening changes a bit. Jerry now says that at 7:30 p.m., the twins and Madeleine were in their beds. But, quote, he does not know if they were asleep, but from the silence, he presumed that they were. As it was still early, he took a bath. He thinks that Kate had already done so. They talked a little and drank wine or beer. He also states that before they left for the tapas, and, quote, because the children's bedroom door was ajar as always, he opened it a little more, listening from the outside. And, as there was complete silence, he did not even enter, returning the door to its previous position with a space of about 10 centimeters. In her second interview, before she became an arguido suspect, Kate says that she had showered by 6:40 p.m., while Jerry was out and before David Payne came by. It seems a bit odd that the first time she remembers a bath, it happened after she and Jerry put the children down, and now it is Jerry saying he took a bath. She then says they did have wine. She had the New Zealand white wine, and Jerry had either that or a beer. She says Jerry may have had a shower. As to putting the children to bed, Kate says she and the children all sat on Madeleine's bed and read a story, and she thinks that, quote, maybe Jerry was in the room. Then the twins kissed Madeleine, and they, both, Jerry and Kate, put them in their beds, and then they went and kissed Madeleine, who was already lying down under the covers because it was a bit cold. Kate states that Madeleine was lying on her left side with a soft toy and a pink blanket, which she thinks was over her. She states that, quote, she doesn't know if the children were in the same position when they left the apartment. Kate also states this was around 7:15 p.m., and she is sure they checked to see that they were sleeping. However, although Kate says they checked on the children before they left for the tapas restaurant, she then gives a rather confused rendition. She doesn't know who, however. Jerry says it was him. She only knows the children were quiet. She doesn't know if they were in their same positions. She says she is sure they were asleep because Jerry told her so, and all was quiet. In both of Jerry's statements in May and Kate's one statement in May, they say they stayed in the apartment for wine and beer for an hour before putting the kids down and before heading out to the tapas. Only in Jerry's later Aguido statement in September does he state they sat on one of the couches, although he doesn't remember which one. In Kate's book, she has settled on herself taking a bath before Jerry arrives at the apartment and Jerry taking a shower after they put the children to bed. She does not say the children were asleep when she and Jerry left the room, but that they knew they would fall asleep shortly. She says she didn't see the children again before going to the restaurant, only Jerry did, and they had drinks in the sitting room. Whew, is all of this unimportant information? Do we really expect people to remember little details that occurred just before a tragedy? Well, sometimes, because it is the last time one has seen the children all together, one knows exactly what one's last movements and sights were. On the other hand, maybe emotion has clouded these details. Regardless of whether the McCanns are clear on this matter or a bit confused, we can conclude a few things. 1. Kate and Jerry cannot account for the time before their arrival at the tapas. They may have spent an hour having drinks in the living room, or they could have had the drinks outside on the veranda, or they could have left early and wandered about the complex. We simply do not know because there are no witnesses. Therefore, if an accident occurred when the children were left unattended, this could have happened as early as 7:30 p.m., or if one wants to say they put the children to bed even earlier and left the apartment, then 7 p.m. could be the last time anyone else saw them. Well, David reported Kate McCann was in the apartment with the kids in the late afternoon. Okay. He might have seen the children then, but after that, only the couple word is there. Okay, number 2. Kate says she did not see the children before they left the apartment. She claims Jerry did see them, but his own words show that this is not true. He said he only listened outside their door. So in reality, from 7:30 p.m. at least, the McCanns had not seen their children. It is not impossible that they took drinks out of the veranda, and during that time, Madeleine came into the living room, climbed on the couch, and fell. Assuming the children were asleep since all was quiet inside, they may have left for the tapas unaware that Madeleine was behind the couch, already dead or dying. All of this nitpicking over exactly what the McCanns did from 7 to 7:30 or to 8:30 p.m. might be meaningless, unless indeed Madeleine had an accident that they were unaware of. Then it is entirely possible that the time of death, should Madeleine have died in the apartment, could be 7:30 p.m. or even earlier, allowing for the necessary time for decomposition to occur to the point it could be noted by the cadaver dog. Note, the issue of how soon a qualified cadaver dog can determine a deceased person was in a particular spot seems to have been proven to be much smaller a time frame than in the past. I will not go into the various scientific tests and data, but the time frame appears to have lessened to quite a minimal amount of time, making the exact time of death for Madeleine less important than previously. All right, what we know. 1. The last time Kate saw Madeleine and knew her to be alive in the apartment was 7 p.m. 2. If the McCanns weren't in the apartment or were out on the veranda at 7:30 p.m., Madeleine could have died 2 to 3 hours before Kate sounded the alarm. But wait, there were 2 more times when someone visited the apartment and went inside, and therefore Madeleine could have been seen alive and in her bed much later than 7 or 7:30 p.m. This will be Jerry's 9:10 p.m. check and Matt's 9:30 p.m. check. Matt clearly states he never saw Madeleine. He claims he entered the McCann's apartment through the unlocked patio doors and walked into the living room and saw the twins in the bedroom, but did not see Madeleine because he didn't stick his head in the bedroom door to where he could see her in her bed. The only other possible time when Madeleine could have been seen alive and in her bed was during Jerry's 9:10 p.m. check. He does state he saw Madeleine in her bed. He says in his first interview that at 9:05 p.m., the deponent entered the club apartment using his key, the door being locked, and went to the children's bedroom, and that the twins and Madeleine were in perfect condition. He then went to the toilet, where he remained a few instants, and then he left the apartment. In Jerry's second interview, his story about how he enters the apartment changes from the locked front door to accessing the apartment through the sliding patio doors. He now states, quote, he noticed the children's bedroom door was not ajar as he had left it, but halfway open, which he thought was strange, having then thought that possibly Madeleine had gotten up to go to sleep in his bedroom so as to avoid the noise produced by her siblings. Therefore, he entered the children's bedroom and established visual contact with each of them, checking, and he is certain that they all 3 were deeply asleep. He left the children's bedroom, returning to place the door how he had already previously described, and then went to the bathroom. Everything else was normal. The shutters, the curtains, and the windows were closed. During his Arguido interview, Jerry adds a little more information about how he saw Madeleine. On this occasion, the three children were lying in their beds asleep. He is sure of this. Moreover, he says that with respect to Madeleine, she was in the same position in which he had left her at the beginning of the night. Madeleine was lying on her left side, completely uncovered, lying on top of the covers with a soft toy and blanket, both pink, next to her head. Kate adds in her book that Jerry stopped to note how beautiful Madeleine was as well, and that while he had repositioned the door back to the normal position, Matt and Kate again found it in the far more open position. It is important to note that this last sighting by Jerry also coincides with the door being in a more open position than normal. The indication being made by the McCanns, if their stories of the door being found in a wider position in both of their checks, in spite of the claim that Jerry returned the door to the normal position, is that Madeleine was seen alive at around 9:10 p.m. and missing by the time Matt checked, because he also saw the door in a wider position. Seeing Madeleine after finding the widely open door, Madeleine was removed from the apartment in a living form between 9:10 and 9:35. At just the time Jane Tanner sees the man carrying a child off down the street from the McCann's apartment building. The fact Jerry finds the door placement wider and Matt also finds the door placement wider indicates, if their statements are the truth, that someone was in the bedroom, or at least in the apartment when Jerry arrived, hid, and then when Jerry left, opened the door further and removed Madeleine from her bed. Now I can make a few determinations to add to these first three. 1. Madeleine went missing on May 3rd, 2007. 2. Madeleine went missing between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening. 3. The emotions of Kate and Jerry McCann were real. 4. The last person to claim to see Madeleine alive between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening was Jerry McCann. 5. If the claims made by the McCanns and Matt are truthful about the door standing in the wider position, this would narrow the time of an intruder in the apartment to the time between 9:05 and 9:35 that evening. 6. If the claims made by the McCanns and Matt about the doors are not truthful, but Jerry's statement about seeing Madeleine is truthful, then the abductor could have removed Madeleine any time between 9:05 and 10 p.m. 7. If Jerry is not being truthful about seeing Madeleine in her bed, then Madeleine may well have left her bedroom early in the evening, had an accident that caused her to remain behind the sofa, in which case it is possible that she opened the door to a wider position and Jerry never touched it. 8. Depending on the truthfulness of the McCanns and Matt's statements, Madeleine was either abducted alive or wandered off between 9:05 and 9:35 p.m., abducted between 9:05 and 10 p.m., or died earlier in the night behind the sofa, and her body removed by 10 p.m. by Jerry McCann. 9. Both Jerry and Matt indicate the window and shutters were closed when they checked on the children, which means no abductor came through the window unless he did so in the 9:35 to 10 p.m. time frame. Otherwise, he would have to come through the unlocked patio doors. Part 5. The checks, the doors, and the windows. Madeleine and the twins were alive and supposedly sleeping when the McCanns last saw them, or at least when Jerry last saw them. And we know that by 10 p.m., the alleged time that Kate found Madeleine gone, or shortly after, Madeleine was no longer in the apartment or hidden by the sofa in the apartment. Someone had to remove her, or she had to remove herself. What possibly could have happened? Madeleine could have woken up and left through a door, or climbed or fallen through the window, or someone snuck or broke in and carried her off through a window or a door, or one of the McCanns took Madeleine out of a door or a window and hid her somewhere in Praia da Luz. The McCanns claimed they did not open any window in the apartment, particularly not the bedroom window of the room in which the children were asleep. From what I have read, the window was not easy for a barely 4-year-old child to open. So if the McCanns were not lying to cover up carelessness, then Madeleine could not have climbed up on the bed and crawled out the window, dropped to the ground, and wandered off to be kidnapped. Even if it were possible, and I think most of us would agree, It would be a fair stretch to imagine this little tyke being willing to climb out a window into the street, and then, just at that moment, a kidnapper wandered by. Furthermore, according to the physical examination by the PJ, there is no sign of anyone crawling through the window in either direction or in the dirt below. If indeed a small child climbed out and landed outside, there was no evidence of this. So, this theory, I think, we can put to rest quickly. Also, the McCanns adamantly state Madeleine did not climb out the window. Could Madeleine have walked out the front door or the sliding door? Kate herself claims her child was not capable of opening and shutting the sliding door, and contending with the child's safety gate outside, which leaves only the front door. This door is claimed to be locked by Jerry. There was, however, at least one comment from Jane Tanner, who said she had worried her child could get out the doors to her house, and the child was younger than Madeleine. I have not learned of any crime reenactment that proved the possibility of a child Madeleine's age being able to open the locked door, or the back sliding doors for that matter. Again, however, the McCanns are adamant that this did not happen, and since Madeleine's body wasn't found nearby dead of natural or accidental causes, we would have to believe an abductor found Madeleine out in the street in a small space of time between the regular checks the McCanns claim occurred. I concur with the McCanns that Madeleine did not wander away, never to be found. I also do not believe there is evidence she escaped the apartment and was snatched up by a predator. Let's see what the McCanns say about the door issue. In Jerry's first statement, he does not say how he and Kate left the apartment to go to the Tapas restaurant. He claims that when he came back to do his check at 9:05 p.m., he used his key to open the locked front door. If the sliding doors were open, he apparently chose to go the long way around and enter the apartment through the front door. It's not a very long way around. It's an extra few steps. Yet, he then claims his friend Matthew Oldfield went through the sliding glass doors, which he says were always unlocked, to check on his kids at 9:30 p.m. And then he says Kate went at 10 p.m. to do her check and also entered through the front door with her key. She noted the sliding door was closed. He does not describe how Kate left the apartment after finding Madeleine gone. Kate does not say how she and Jerry left the apartment in her first statement. She also does not state how Jerry came and went from the apartment during his checks. She does say that Matthew came into the house with the sliding glass doors that were always unlocked to check on the kids at 9:30. At 10 p.m., she claims she also went through these doors that were closed but unlocked. What she does not say is which door she went out of when she went to raise the alarm that Madeleine was missing. Police files state that Matthew later says he went into the house through the sliding doors. In Jerry's second interview on May 10th, he states that on the first night at the resort, no one went out in the evening. On the second evening, on Sunday, he took the family out to the tapas, children included, and he locked both the front and back sliding doors while they were gone. After the children had dinner, they returned, entered using the key, and they put the children to bed. Afterwards, Jerry said he and Kate left the apartment at 8:30 p.m. to go to the tapas adult group event that evening by the main door, which he was sure was locked, and that the back door was also closed and locked. While they were at the tapas on Sunday evening, he and Kate took turns with their checks. No one else checked on their kids. And, quote, he is sure they always entered through the front door, not knowing if they locked it upon leaving. Monday and Tuesday followed the same routine, indicating the doors to the apartment were locked, both the main and sliding doors. However, on Wednesday evening, Jerry claims that he thinks David Payne went to his apartment to check that the children were well, that he and Kate had already left the back sliding door closed but not locked to allow entrance by their group colleagues to check on the children. Jerry, quote, clarifies the main door was always closed but not necessarily locked with a key. David Payne never makes any such statement that he checked on the McCann children, and in fact, he and his wife Fiona had a habit of never leaving the tapas restaurant to check on the children because they were keeping track of their own through their child monitor. See how confusing everything is? The report further reads, despite what he, Jerry, said in his previous statements, he states now and with certainty that he left with Kate through the back door, which he consequently closed but did not lock, given that this is only possible from the inside. Concerning the front door, although he is certain that it was closed, it is unlikely that it was locked because they left through the back door. I'm not sure why one can't lock the front door just because one leaves through another door. Okay, this is a strange statement made here by Jerry, which I am sure raised the eyebrows of detectives. Now Jerry says he didn't come through the front door, but through the sliding glass doors. He leaves the same way and closes the doors. He says that Matthew went through those doors as well on a 9:30 check. Quote, given that he did not have a key, and it was usual for them to enter in that way. Kate then comes and goes around 10, at the same way at 10 p.m. He declares here that it is impossible for Madeleine to have left the house on her own. Even though later evidence does not point to Madeleine leaving the apartment on her own, if there was any possibility of their child being able to open a door and leave, one would think Jerry and Kate would make sure the house was locked down. This appears to be true for the rest of the vacationing friends. Their apartments had all doors and windows locked. Furthermore, because the apartment was on a busy corner with a dark car park behind the children's bedroom, there was a concern for keeping strangers from accessing the apartment, both for the safety of the children and to prevent robbery. But McCanns now claim to have left the doors open without much worry for any issue, child getting out, predator getting in, or robbers getting access. On September 6th, Kate says in an interview that she and Jerry left through the sliding doors and that the front door was not locked. She thinks it could be open from the inside, but not from the outside. This statement makes little sense because even if the door can be opened from the inside, if it cannot be opened from the outside, it is effectively locked. Both she and Jerry left the apartment through the sliding glass doors during all their checks. She does not mention this time if Matthew entered the apartment during his check of the children. Kate mentions that she and Jerry never checked on anyone else's children because, quote, it was usual just to check on their own children, yet already it has been stated that the sliding door was left open for others to check on their kids, like David and Matthew supposedly had done. Yeah, it is crazy. This stuff is so actually crazy. They change the story so many times. You can see why there is suspicion upon the McCanns and what happened that night. It is important to note here again that all the other Tapas members state they never left their doors unlocked, including the sliding doors, and always entered the front doors of the apartment with the key. Are you catching the drift of how these statements about the locked door issues are changing bit by bit? First, Jerry says both he and Kate used a key on the locked front door. But oddly, Jerry comes through the open sliding doors. He doesn't remember how they left the apartment. Kate also doesn't remember, but she remembers that she and Matthew came through the sliding doors later. Jerry says on Monday and Tuesday nights, all the doors in the apartment were locked, but by Wednesday and Thursday, the sliding doors are left unlocked for easy access by other members to check on their kids. Something none of them do. Why the shift from totally locked down to every door open and accessible? Was there starting to be a problem with the theory someone broke into the house through the window? That was the original claim from the McCanns, which was later changed to the abductor must have slipped into the house through an open door, and then inexplicably decided to climb out the window instead of walking out the door. At one point, they claimed they were comfortable leaving the sliding glass doors open because they could be seen from the Tapas restaurant, which they cannot. But even if they could, why are they comfortable leaving the front door open right on a road? A door next to the children's bedroom? Not only are you leaving children unattended for large chunks of time, but you also leave the apartment unlocked in a strange neighborhood for someone to come in and attack your kids. A bit odd, isn't it? Then again, maybe if you're willing to leave your kids without proper supervision, it may not be so odd not to worry about other safety issues either. Sometimes when profiling, it is hard to determine what are lies and what is behavior we find unacceptable, but they do not. However, the stories change from locked to unlocked, and regardless of the McCanns' issues about child safety, the change is a red flag that something may not be as it seems. All right, let's stop here and look at the viewpoint of a child sex predator who is thinking about grabbing Madeleine from the McCanns' apartment. This may shed more light on the issue of locked and unlocked doors and breaking in or leaving through windows. All right, first of all, the predator needs to know there is a child inside he wants to take. So he must have spent some time observing the McCanns and their comings and goings. Surely a predator is not going to eeny, meeny, miny, mo and simply pick any old window to crawl through. What is the point if there's no child there? Or if the child is there, but the parent is there as well? What if there's just an adult there? That would be a good way of getting nothing you came for and going away in handcuffs. So here we have a child predator watching the McCann's apartment. What he sees is that for 2 nights, the doors are locked all the way around. The only way into the house is through the window, if he is not good at picking door locks. So maybe he didn't realize that on Wednesday and Thursday evening, he could have just walked in a door. What he needs to do is hide on the street and wait for a window, no pun intended, of opportunity. Now, with all the comings and goings of the McCanns and their friends, not to mention the other folks in the resort or on the street, there is no particular moment where this criminal should feel he has sufficient time to work with. He would have to hide and then look both ways, well, actually 3 ways because the apartment is on a corner, and then break open the shutter and climb in through the window, find the child in the house, grab her, and then climb out or run out a door. It's not 3 a.m. when everyone is asleep, so there is going to be foot or car traffic all the while. Could this have happened? Well, in all fairness to the McCanns, the answer is yes. While it seems impossible to many people, or at least improbable, as a profiler I can tell you that predators spend a lot of time hunting and going home without prey, simply because he never got that moment in time to commit his crime. He may hunt for days, weeks, months before he gets lucky, but obsessed over the thrill he will get when he achieves his goal, he will keep on trolling for his victims. Some creep could have been looking for a child at the resort for a while, saw Madeleine, and then got a lucky moment to go in after her. So if Kate found an open window in the apartment, it is possible, if not likely, someone came in and took Madeleine away. All right, let's stop and look at our evidence. 1. The stories of the McCanns about the doors goes from locked to unlocked over time. 2. It is very improbable Madeleine left on her own, although a crime scene reconstruction should have been done to prove this. It is interesting the McCanns were so quickly adamant that this did not happen. A predator could have broken in through the window and taken Madeleine, doing so that day because he did not realize the doors were unlocked. Unlikely, but it's possible. 4. If the McCanns were not coming in and out of the front door and were entering through the back sliding doors, it is less likely a predator would break in. He would not know if they were in the house since he wouldn't see them enter and leave. If he did take the chance, he might be caught. Jerry alluded to this possibility when he said he felt someone might have been in the children's room when he went in to make his check. All right, this leads to a few conclusions. All right, let's see, where are we at? All right, let's go through them again. I know it's difficult to keep on track with this, but I'm hoping by repeating it, you can get the point. 1, if the doors were all locked and had no signs of breaking and entering, the abductor would have had to come through the window. 2, if all the doors were unlocked, the abductor didn't need to break in through the window, since it is a lot easier to slip in a door. Unless the predator was a total moron, he likely would test the doors to see if he could simply walk in. 3, while a locked door supports the need to break in through a window, the unlocked doors make it much less likely that an abductor would choose that method of entry. Oh, what a tangled web has been woven by the McCanns, whether by poor memory, reality, or changing stories. Kate and Jerry say they did not open the window, and Madeleine could not have, which means only one of 2 things. 1, a predator did come into the apartment through the window and kidnap Madeleine, or 2, the McCanns are not being truthful. Let's go with the presumption that the McCanns are truthful, and neither of them opened the window that Kate says she found open when she did her 10 p.m. check. The open window would mean one of 3 things. The abductor broke in through the window and left through the window. The abductor broke in through the window and left through the door. Or the abductor came in through the door and left through the window. Since the doors were actually open, if the abductor came in and out of the window, he made himself work harder than necessary. Although it is possible, it is highly improbable that the criminal wouldn't take the easiest method, as I noted earlier. Easier means fewer things going wrong and less evidence left behind. The doors are supposedly open, so the predator should have come in through them. And if he came in through them, why would he bother crawling out the window instead of walking out the door, especially while having to carry a child? You see why this isn't making sense? Right? Considering the door is right next to the children's room, there is no need to crawl out of a window Only if the window were not near a door and open onto a more secluded location would it make sense for a kidnapper to go out a window. Of course, there is the theory that one abductor went in through the door and handed the child out the window to another abductor. But it would still be easier to go in and out the door. We will continue on to why it seems no one entered or left by the window. This is where some major red flags go up in the story being given by the McCanns. The problem here is the PJ says the window and shutters were not tampered with. There was no sign of a break-in. Furthermore, there is a lichen on the windowsill, which shows no disturbance, so the kidnapper would have had to somehow hoisted himself through the window without leaving a mark of any sort. There are no fingerprints either, but this could be explained by the perpetrator using gloves or simply not leaving a print, which does happen. There is no sign of a disturbance in the area below the window, no scuffs or footprints. All in all, there's no sign of breaking and entering through the window. The only print on the window is from Kate, who claims she leaned on the sill and looked out into the street after she discovered Madeleine missing and the window open. So putting aside all scenarios of doors and window, physical evidence does not support a breaking and entering methodology. Therefore, the best conclusion one can reach is that a stranger did not come through or open the window. This leads one to surmise the McCanns are lying about not opening the window themselves. And there is only one reason to lie about that: to stage an abduction that did not happen. All right, I'm going to go through there's 11 determinations at this point. Here we go. 1, Madeleine went missing on May 3rd, 2007. 2, Madeleine went missing between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening. 3, the emotions of Kate and Jerry McCann are real. 4, the last person to claim to see Madeleine alive between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening is Jerry McCann. 5, depending on the truthfulness of the McCanns and Matt's statements, Madeleine was either abducted alive or wandered off between 9:05 and 9:35 p.m., abducted between 9:05 and 10 p.m., or died earlier in the night behind the sofa and her body removed by 10 p.m. 6, both Jerry and Matt indicate the window and shutters were closed when they checked on the children, which means no abductor came through the window unless he did so in the 9:30 to 10 p.m. time frame. Otherwise, he'd have to come through the unlocked patio doors. The abductor is none too bright if he came through the window when he could have come through and left through a door. 8, the history of the McCanns and their friends indicate that all doors and windows were locked every night while the children were left on their own, including the night of May 3rd. 9, none of the couples actually had any routine of checking on anyone else's children. Kate and Jerry state they only ever looked after their own children. Dave and Fiona had a monitor and never left the tapas to do any checks. Jane Tanner says bluntly that she and her husband Russell never checked on others' children. Matt and Rachel never did either until the night in question, when Matt suddenly not only does a listening check on his way to the tapas, but also does an inside visual check, barring Madeleine, for Kate. 10, Matt's story about checking on the children and checking on the children by way of the open sliding doors is suspect. 11, if all the doors were locked and the window was not used as an access point, there was no abduction. Part 6, the development of a theory. Before we run off saying the McCanns are guilty of anything, we must play devil's advocate and see if we can knock this theory down by finding some wrong assumptions or incorrect, quote, facts that led us to such a conclusion. Let's say we have an idiot for an abductor, and he did go in or out the window. The PJ says the physical evidence does not support this, but what if the PJ is simply wrong? Are they just claiming there isn't any physical evidence when there is? Are they just incompetent and didn't find it when it existed? Well, let's see what the PJ claims is proof that there was no predator who broke in or climbed through the window. 1, no fingerprints of anyone but Kate McCann. 2, no sign of tool marks on the lacquered aluminum windows or damage to the window lock. 3, no disturbance to the lichen on the windowsill. 4, no footprints on the bed one would need to step on to get in or out of the window. 5, the shutters only open from the inside according to the resort, but even if it were possible from the outside, as the McCanns claim, the shutters make horrible squeaky noises that would draw attention to someone breaking in. I have a link you can find in the description which will take you to a blog that I did. It was called What About the Window? And you will find there an explanation, and you'll also see a video. And what's in the video? Well, there is a shutter test that I did with Peter MacLeod of the actual McCann bedroom shutters at the resort in Praia da Luz. We had a day together of examining the resort, the apartment from the outside, Praia da Luz, and surrounding areas. Peter has gone on to have a slightly different theory than mine, but I remember our day doing research together very fondly. So go check that out in the description. I will have more links in the description as well in the future chapters. So according to the PJ, there is no evidence of forced entry at the window. Are they lying? Let's check out what Kate McCann has to say in her book 4 years later. Here, in trying to prove her innocence and get people focused on Madeleine being abducted, is her chance to bring home the point that the PJ is framing them by claiming there were no signs of forced entry into the apartment. This is what Kate said about the matter. For a long time, we would assume that the abductor had entered and exited through the window of the children's bedroom. But it is equally possible that he used the patio doors or even had a key to the front door. Perhaps he's either came in or went out via the window, not both. Perhaps he hadn't been through it at all, but had opened it to prepare for an emergency escape route if needed, or merely to throw investigators off the scent. Nowhere in the book does Kate talk about the evidence or lack of evidence connected with the window. Nowhere in the book does she say the PJ fabricated the evidence results or failed to do their job properly. On the contrary, she validates that there was no physical evidence of a break-in at the window with this phrase, quote, perhaps he hadn't been through it at all. Indeed, this statement couldn't possibly have been made if there was evidence of someone crawling into or out of the apartment by way of the window. So Kate admitted that none exists. If none exists, then there was no predator breaking in that way or leaving that way, and the only explanation Kate could give for the window being open was that the kidnapper opened it as a ruse or a possible escape plan. Both explanations being quite ridiculous. As a ruse, it would have been useless, and there would have been no reason to prepare for an escape plan. All he had to do was grab the child and run. I guess the scenario Kate was trying to conjure up is one in which the predator gave all the children drugs, opened the window while waiting for them to take effect, and then, if he couldn't get out the door with a solidly medicated Madeleine because now too much time had passed and someone was entering the apartment, well, then he could crawl through the window. Is that not a laughable scenario? This story created by Kate appears to have been an attempt to validate Jerry's bizarre claim that he felt someone was in the apartment when he did his check, that the abductor must have snuck out the window with Madeleine because Jerry was blocking his exit by the doors as he stood in the street chatting with Jeremy, also known as Jez. That is the exact time when Jane claims she saw the abductor crossing the street behind them with Madeleine in his arms. So the abductor couldn't come out the doors because he would have run into Jerry and Jeremy. So he slipped out the window. Wait a minute. No, actually, well, let's see. The front door was next to the window, and both of them were around the corner from where Jerry and Jez were standing. So Jerry wouldn't have seen him leaving by the door or the window. What? So he could have gone out the door. Why not? And then he walks right into the street where Jerry and Jeremy are talking. Why would he do that? Wouldn't he have gone the other direction on the street so he couldn't have been seen by them? But of course, there is no evidence of an abductor crawling through the window. So we would have to say he only planned that, and then someone did go out through the doors but did not run into Jerry and Jeremy. But maybe was seen by Jane. The devil's advocate attempt has failed to produce a believable rebuttal to the theory that Kate and Jerry are not being truthful about a stranger opening the window of the children's bedroom. Instead, Kate has acknowledged that PJ is correct about the window not showing evidence of a break-in or as a passageway in or out of the apartment. Therefore, no abductor likely opened the window. We are back at the place where we must accept that one of the McCanns did so and lied about it. But there is more damning evidence about the window. When Kate goes to the tapis to raise the alarm, she does not mention an open window. She, in fact, according to all the friends' statements, does not say Madeleine had been abducted, something she would surely have said if she had clearly noted that someone had broken into the children's bedroom and taken her child. She only says, Madeleine is gone. Or according to all the statements by the friends present at the tapis, Kate told us Madeleine has disappeared. In response, Jerry supposedly says, she can't be gone. Okay, think about how one would react if one found the house locked up and 1, a child missing, or 2, a child missing and a window open in the child's bedroom. For the former, there is no explanation for the missing child, and therefore all one can say is the child is gone, or the child is missing. If the child was missing and a window was open in the child's bedroom, then one is much more likely to say, someone broke into the bedroom and took the child, or the child has been kidnapped. What other explanation, other than the child crawling out the window, which in this case, the McCanns never for one moment believed, then someone broke in and abducted the child? So it appears that when Kate runs to the tapis to raise the alarm, the only information she has is that Madeleine is missing from her bed. If Jerry did indeed comment that it was impossible for Madeleine to be missing under the circumstances Kate encountered, just Madeleine missing from her bed, most likely this would be because the apartment was locked down and the story of the open sliding door was fabricated along with the open window. At the time Jerry might have made that statement, he hadn't time to develop a scenario that would make more sense for a child to have disappeared without his help from the apartment. So now we have 2 possible theories. 1, Madeleine died in the apartment early in the evening and her body was removed by Jerry McCann between 9:30 and 10 p.m. on the evening of May 3rd, 2007. The window was opened by one of the McCanns to stage an abduction. Or 2, the McCanns and friends were so distraught they're imagining things, forgetting things, and confusing things, leading to suspicions that there was no abductor, yet, in fact, an abductor did access the apartment through an open door and left through one of the doors unseen. All right, so let's stop and review, yet again, the stories of the room checks. There are many versions of these stories, from only the parents of the child checked on their own children, to sometimes someone else checked on another family's children, even though the McCanns adamantly stated they did not do this themselves. The times they checked varied from every 15 minutes to every half hour. Also, how the children were checked goes from listening outside the windows to listening from inside the apartment to actually laying eyes on the children. Starting with the actual times of the check, think about what normal people would do. Well, normal for people who would leave tots unattended in a strange hotel in a strange country. Think about how they would likely check on children while relaxing and drinking. Some of the times given by the friends are to the exact minute. Is it believable that people on their 2nd or 3rd or 4th glass of wine, or whatever they were drinking, are that focused on the exact minute they are on? Highly unlikely. More probably, one parent suddenly says, I better go check on the kids. Or, hey, you need to go check on the kids. It is more reasonable, considering the varying stories of the time checks, to believe that the parents made them when they felt too much time had passed since the last check, or someone felt like taking a walk or smoking a cigarette if any of these people smoked. It must be remembered that no one in the group was particularly worried about something happening to the children. There was a general assumption that the children were asleep, and the checks were to verify that the unusual hadn't happened. So it was not a vigilant, but a relaxed, just to be sure, kind of check. This makes it more likely that the checks were far more inconsistent and haphazard than the families admit. Also, the hearing checks were more likely than the visual, since the main worry appears to be the child waking up and crying rather than a physical incident of any kind. Even Matthew Oldfield claimed to do a hearing check on the McCanns, some children, somewhere around 9 p.m. And then, when he supposedly actually enters the apartment at 9:30 to do the check, he doesn't go into the children's bedroom, but listens from the living room. Although Jerry claimed to have seen Madeleine on his 9:10 p.m. check, we only have his word for this, and it would not be unreasonable to postulate that he simply listened at the door or window himself before chatting with Jeremy, or when he went into the apartment and used the bathroom. He just passed through the living room next to the children's bedroom, heard no noise from within, and simply left thinking everything was okay. Or did he actually look in the bedroom, saw an empty bed, and then found Madeleine deceased behind the sofa and had a situation to deal with? The evidence and changing statements lead me to believe: 1, the checks were sporadic. 2, many of the checks were listening checks. 3, no one checked on anyone else's children. 4, we have no proof Jerry saw Madeleine alive or in the apartment at 9:10 p.m., or that Matthew actually entered the apartment to do a check for Kate. So when was Madeleine removed from the apartment? Alive, or alive and sedated, or dead? Interestingly, Kate's claims of the window being open narrows the possible time of abduction down to after Jerry's check on Madeleine to her check on Madeleine. That was allegedly at 10 p.m. With Matthew supposedly checking at 9:30 as well, we have an abductor who had 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there, and with a number of people supposedly running back and forth to the apartment each 15 minutes and running back to the tapas at irregular times, the abductor would have to get really lucky. Gotten that window of opportunity in the midst of a beehive of parents coming and going. With Kate's and the friends' claims of so many people rushing about, an abduction is extremely unlikely. If the checks were very limited, an abductor theory would actually be more believable. The tots would have even worse parents, but the chances of a child being abducted would have been far more likely. If an abduction did occur, the only time, according to the McCann's claims, would be at 9:10 to 9:20, when Jane Tanner claims to have seen the man walking off with Madeleine. Yet the other sighting, further toward the beach by the Smith family, actually would make sense time-wise, somewhere around 10 p.m. Yet the McCanns are adamant this could not be the man unless, as Kate states in her book, it is also the same man Jane saw 40 or 50 minutes earlier. Now, it is pretty obvious that a kidnapper is unlikely to take that long to walk such a short distance, less than 10 minutes away, or to walk around in circles with a stolen child wasting time, nor is he likely to duck in somewhere and then pop out again with the kidnapped little girl. Why can't the McCanns just accept that the 10 p.m. sighting would be the correct one, or could be the correct one? That this was the kidnapper that the Smiths saw. True, Mr. Smith later said he thought it was Jerry that they saw carrying a little girl, but why do the McCanns not think it could just be a man who looked like Jerry? Or that it was the kidnapper, but the Smiths are just wrong in how they describe him. Why can't they accept the 10 p.m. sighting unless it is connected to the earlier sighting by Jane? The only logical reason is that the earlier time provides an alibi for Jerry, should he have been carrying Madeleine's body off to the beach to hide it. Also, they claim Jerry was in the tapas restaurant when Kate comes to tell the group that Maddie is missing, and therefore he should have an alibi for the time of the Smith sighting. Wouldn't that be perfect? I mean, why couldn't it be the Smiths then that saw Madeleine being carried away if Jerry had a solid alibi at 10 p.m.? But hey, it's an alibi I've never found proof of. No evidence to confirm this. This, to me, is the number one piece of behavioral evidence that points to the McCanns' involvement in what happened to Madeleine that evening. The link is, there is a link in the description. It is called The Smith Sighting versus the Tanner Sighting. Again, I will repeat. The Smith sighting and the fact that the McCanns refused to acknowledge it, even though Jerry has an absolute, according to them, alibi at 10 p.m., that he was in the tapas when Kate showed up. Even if he has that supposed alibi, why can't they believe that the Smith sighting could be real? Why not? It makes zero sense unless the Smith sighting is actually Jerry McCann. But check out the link in the description. The Smith sighting versus the Tanner sighting. All of this leads me back to the timeline, and it seems to be that there are unsubstantiated times that the checks were made, checks with times that are too specific to be believed. But most importantly, what really happened at 9:30 p.m.? This is when Jerry was there. 9:30 p.m. This was Kate's time to go check on the children. But suddenly, Matthew goes in her place, something that was not done in the past. Matthew's story is suspect because he goes through the back sliding door, something as unusual for the group, and was unusual for the McCanns, as before they kept the place locked and went themselves through the front door. Although there is that odd bit about leaving the sliding door unlocked the night before, and some confusing stories about how the children were checked on the previous night. But anyway, so why does Matt go and make the check at 9:30? According to both Jane Tanner and Kate McCann, it was because Jerry was taking an unusually long time to return from his check. In spite of some statements by the McCanns and friends that the walk to the apartments and the check and the return took but a couple of minutes, the wait staff at the tapas restaurant stated that sometimes the missing person was gone for 15 minutes or so. Even though, in theory, the checks could have been much shorter, it seems odd that Kate and Jane would think Jerry taking all of more than 5 minutes to return, according to Jerry, Kate, and Jane, that would have made Kate wonder what was causing the delay, to the point where she comments he might have gotten sidetracked watching the football game, on the television in the apartment. One would think quite a bit more than 5 minutes must have passed for such a comment to be made. If Kate was worried or annoyed or curious, then Jerry's check to the apartment beginning at 9:05 to 9:10 may well have extended to the bottom of the hour. Hence, when it was Kate's turn to check on the children, it would make little sense for her to go if Jerry were still in the apartment, distracted by the football game on television. So Matt, upon leaving to do his check, would very likely offer to stop by and see what was taking Jerry so long, not to check on the McCann's children. Stopping by to find Jerry also explains why he wouldn't have done just a listen by the window check on his way to the apartment, as he claims to have done earlier in the day. If he then knocked on the door and found Jerry with the body of his daughter Madeleine, he indeed would have probably entered the apartment, possibly by the sliding doors if Jerry opened them for him. Interestingly, Russell O'Brien, the husband of Jane Tanner, went with Matt to do a check on his own kids. Matt was to check his and then stop at the McCann's apartment. Did Russell also find out that something happened to Madeleine at that time? When Matt came back to the tapas, he said that Russell had to stay back because his daughter was ill. He supposedly ended up doing some laundry because his daughter had vomited. It is said that when Jane went back the second time, she relieved Russell and he came back to the tapas. Later, when Madeleine was found missing, he and Jerry ripped off a cover from Madeleine's book, and Russell helped write a timeline to give to the police when they showed up. It is possible Russell helped in some other way while Jerry was carrying off Madeleine, like cleaning up the area behind the couch, and perhaps doing some laundering. Of course, this is only one imagined scenario. If it was indeed true that Madeleine died behind the sofa and there was a cover-up of this incident. The wait staff does confirm that Kate raised the alarm at 10 p.m. or shortly after by coming back to the restaurant. They state that everyone got up and left. They do not state if Jerry was among them, and there are no statements from wait staff that verify if Jerry came back after his 9:10 p.m. check, or if he did, whether he actually came back by or after 10 p.m. Even Diane Webster, the one person who remained in the restaurant after Kate raised the alarm, does not comment until far later in her rogatory interview that Jerry was in the restaurant at the time, that Kate spoke to him and that Jerry responded, or that Jerry was even at the apartment when she finally left the restaurant when no one came back. Her rogatory interview, in fact, lined up exactly with the other friends' rogatory interviews, so it is likely this later story was created to match the facts that were decided upon by the group, or she heard so much by then she was convinced that this is what happened. Jane Tanner claims she was the biggest drinker in the group. The problems with the checks and times are as follows. 1, everyone supposedly checked on their own children. 2, it was Kate's turn after Jerry. If Jerry had returned in 5 minutes, Kate should have made the check herself. 3, Matthew's check was missing from one of the timelines scribbled down on the ripped-off covers of Madeleine's book. 4, we only have the friend's word for it that Jerry returned after his check and was present at the table when Kate raised the alarm. But could this scenario have occurred? It could if Madeleine died in the apartment. For that matter, it must have occurred if Madeleine died in the apartment. And we have proof she did, as long as you do not have problems with a cadaver dog hitting a scent of a corpse behind the sofa in the McCann's living room, or the other dog finding blood behind the sofa in the living room of the McCann's vacation apartment. The McCanns claim the dogs are junk science, and the evidence provided by the cadaver and blood dog that Madeleine died in the apartment is rubbish. I disagree, and I do so because I believe the dogs are well trained, and the location of the corpse and blood makes sense considering the behaviors of all involved. The theory that Madeleine died in the apartment makes sense as well, also considering the behaviors of everyone involved. This is what I theorize could have happened if the dogs are as skilled as many believe, if the window was opened by the McCanns, and the timelines and the movements of the McCanns and their friends are not exactly as they stated. Madeleine and the twins are given Calpol tablets, or another medication, to sedate them, as during the prior evening it was said that she and her brother were crying for their parents for possibly close to an hour, a story that was given by Kate herself, and she was upset her parents were not there. Jerry later states in his Arguido interview, and Kate states in her book, and their friends state in their rogatory interviews, and also Kate and Jerry, 3 months after the incident, wanted the infant's hair to be tested for drugs. Not the twins' hair, sorry, the twins' hair to be tested for drugs. And they all believe Madeleine and the twins were drugged by the abductor prior to removing Madeleine from the apartment. The theory of an abductor wasting time trying to drug the children, when and how, is ludicrous, but the fact it is so important to bring out this possibility indicates to me that the children may well have been over-medicated, especially because the twins did not wake up on the evening of May 3rd in spite of all the commotion. Although some little children can sleep through anything, Kate checks their breathing to see that they are, well, breathing, although she doesn't try to wake them or seek medical help. The McCanns put the children in bed and go about their evening's activities, either out on the veranda or in the restaurant. Shortly after the children are put to bed, Madeleine gets up, her beloved cuddle cat in hand, and finds her parents are not inside the apartment. She climbs up on the sofa to look out. She slips and falls on the hard-tiled floor. Whether she dies from some kind of accident like a broken neck or a brain concussion or from positional asphyxiation, she ends up lying behind the sofa where she dies. Jerry returns to do his check and finds Madeleine dead. When Matt shows up, they discuss what should be done. Clearly, if this is what happened, and Madeleine died due to too much Calpol, or even just an unfortunate accident while being neglected, Jerry McCann would know he and Kate are in serious trouble. As all the friends appear to be taking similar risks, it is very possible Jerry felt he could confide in them, and they would support whatever course of action he decided. And he would have no choice but to involve some or all of them, depending on who would know the actual facts. At this point, Jerry was aware that soon Kate would find out about Maddie. Then the rest of the friends would find out that something happened to Maddie. He had to make a quick decision, and as a cardiologist and a person who appears to be very controlling and practical, he was certainly the type of person who could make such a dire decision in a very short period of time. The choice was between having the police arrest them for child neglect and manslaughter or possibly homicide, or staging an abduction and having Madeleine go missing. If he decided on the latter, he needed to buy enough time to move Madeleine's body elsewhere and get back. He would tell Matt to inform the group that everything was fine, and he would use that time to take Madeleine's body away from the apartment, secrete it, and hurry back to the tapas. Then once Kate had found Madeleine missing, he would tell her the truth in private. At that point, he would gather with all the friends, settle on the details, and it's not necessary that all of them know the truth. Just maybe a couple of them, and the rest will just go along with, oh, she's been kidnapped. And they would call the police. To review, Jerry went off with Madeleine's body toward the beach, an area that was secluded and with which he was familiar. A typical choice for people dumping bodies is to go to an area they know so they won't be interrupted. Well, that they want to be sure, they would have to know the area well enough to feel comfortable going there, to know that it's not a place people gather, there are people hanging out at that time of night. And so he would have had to have been on that beach prior and think this is a place he could go to and no one would be out there. And Matt went back to the tapas. Then Kate then did her check at 10 p.m. and at some time shortly after 10 p.m., Jerry was back on the scene. The police were called at 10:40 p.m. So the possible non-abduction theory is this. 1, Madeleine died earlier in the evening and Jerry discovered her body on his check. 2, Jerry told Matt what happened. Jerry went to the beach with Madeleine's body while Matt went to the tapas. 3, Kate did her check, found Madeleine missing, raised the alarm, and Jerry returned around that time to tell Kate the truth and with the group write down the timeline. Only those that knew what actually happened would have to alter or add details. The window was open to stage an abduction. And oddly, in staging, people usually do what they think will make it look like something it is not, and they don't do it properly. 5, the police are called at 10:40 p.m. Now, the possible abduction theory, if you want to stick with that. 1, it happened that, like the McCanns and their friends say it did, in spite of their inconsistent statements. 2, Jerry came back quickly from his check. They left the sliding door open. Matt did his check, however poorly. The abductor got in somehow, was seen by Jane Tanner and the Smith family, or both. The abductor opened the window for reasons unknown, or the McCanns opened it for reasons unknown and don't want to admit it. Part 7. The sightings of Jane Tanner and the Smith family. Which is correct? One of the most bizarre aspects of this case, and the most controversial, is the sighting of Jane Tanner of a man carrying away a little girl in pink pajamas just at the time she is walking by Jerry and Jeremy on the street, on her way to do her 9:15 check. The McCanns insist this man was the abductor of Madeleine, and the Smith sighting on the Rua da Escola Primaria had nothing to do with her disappearance. It is this particular fact that further supports a cover-up rather than a real abduction. In Jane Tanner's first interview, she states Jerry left for his check at 9:10, and she left 5 minutes later at 9:15. She claims she passed Jerry talking to another visitor to the Ocean Club. That is Jeremy Wilkins, the guy Jerry played tennis with. She further states she knew Jerry had already been in the apartment to check on his children. This is an astounding statement, considering only 5 minutes had passed since Jerry had left the restaurant, and she found him engaged in a conversation with a tennis mate. How would she have a clue that he had already been into the apartment and wasn't delayed on the way by running into Jeremy Wilkins? She claims they were outside the gate to the back entrance of Jerry's apartment, so there is no way Jane could have known if Jerry was coming or going. The only logical conclusion as to why she made this claim was to corroborate Jerry's statement that he met Jeremy after he did the quick check of his children, and the abductor was hiding in the apartment while he was inside. This fits nicely into the next statement Jane makes, that she saw a man carrying a child that she later believed was Madeleine walking down the street, the Rua Dr. Agostino, and crossing the street upon which Jerry and Jeremy were standing having their chat. Neither of them saw the man, but the timing of the man coming down that street would mean that the abductor slipped out of the apartment with Madeleine by the front door as soon as Jerry left. It is odd, though, that he would go in the direction that would require him to cross the street with people on it, rather than go the other direction away from witnesses. Also, why wouldn't the abductor have peeped out of the door and around the corner to see if the coast was clear before walking off with an abducted child? The story makes little sense, but Jane Tanner swears up and down it is true. Even if the men didn't see the child being carried away, nor did they see Jane Tanner walk by, which is virtually impossible on that narrow street. The McCanns believe the story as well. In her second interview, she becomes even more adamant about her sighting of the man carrying off the child. She states, the man she saw carrying the child was, in her mind, associated with the disappearance of Maddie. When told by the police that the search dogs, the ones who pick up the scent of live humans, not dead ones, did not pick up the scent of Madeleine at the intersection where she claims she saw the man carrying the child, she affirmed immediately that she was not lying, maintaining the honesty of her version. Then she swore by everything most sacred that what she said was true, namely that she saw an individual carrying a child away in his arms. If you go to the description, you'll find a link to my blog, which is called How Jane Tanner Got Lost in a Crowd on an Empty Street. And you'll see how ridiculous this whole concept is, that she came down that street and saw this man, but Jeremy and Jerry didn't see her or the man. It's impossible, because they were right in the middle between Jane and this supposed man walking. So the man was supposedly walking behind them, and they were facing the direction Jane was coming in, but they didn't see either of them. So go check out that link. Is Jane Tanner's story of her sighting credible? Well, it is hard to say. It's hard to buy, shall we say. It's hard to buy, considering that half an hour later, she found Kate screaming that Madeleine was missing,
and never told her that she saw a man going down the street with what could have been her child. She also supposedly never tells Jerry either, opting only to vaguely mention it to Fiona and then, supposedly, the police. Even in the days to come, she doesn't talk to the McCanns about seeing a man going off with a child she is now certain was their child. Her excuse? According to the PJ, when asked why she had not mentioned the sighting to Kate that night, she relates she didn't want to cause them additional suffering. Oh, okay. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of parents whose child has just gone missing. If this were my child and one of my friends had seen a man carrying what could be my child down the street and she knew what he looked like and what direction he had gone and didn't tell me, I would want to kill her. How could she not tell me so we could have sent the police immediately that direction? And even before that, sent someone in that direction. How could she think I wouldn't want to know the most important piece of information about what happened to my child, and instead leave me searching in all the wrong directions, going crazy, trying to get one small clue as to where my child might be? How could she risk my child's life by wasting valuable time that might have been spent finding my child before something terrible happened to her, like rape and murder? Is Kate furious with Jane Tanner? Oh, no. In her book, Madeleine, she only has this to say: I have never felt any anger or disappointment whatsoever towards Jane. On the contrary, I was grateful someone had seen something. I am sure this experience has been a terrible burden for her to carry around with her every day since, and I do feel for her. Let me just stop here, folks, and just say this is not a normal way that any parent of a missing child would feel about someone who didn't give them information to save their child. This is absolutely bizarre. Fascinating as well. Kate also goes against Jane's own statements about not telling the McCanns about the man carrying off their child. Kate says, as soon as she, Jane, heard about Madeleine's disappearance, everything fell into place, and she felt sick. She immediately reported the sighting to the police, and Jerry was informed, but given the condition I was in, he did not share this development with me until morning. Even more fascinating. Did Jerry just say, oh, by the way, dear, when you told Jane that Madeleine was gone, she failed to tell you that she had just seen a man running off with her some 30 minutes or so ago. And I thought you might like to know now that it's too late to save Madeleine. This is surely something the PJ found difficult to comprehend themselves. They have never believed Jane Tanner's story, and by the time she was doing the rogatory interview in London months later, she begged to be believed. Now to the McCanns and their issues with the sightings. While accepting Jane's sighting as the abductor, the McCanns completely tossed off the Smith family sighting of a man carrying a child around 10 p.m. on a road closer to the beach, moving in a more southwesterly direction. Why? Why do they not believe this could be the abductor? Is it because Mr. Smith later said that he saw a video of Jerry carrying one of the twins and it reminded him of the man he had seen carrying a child that night? Or is it that the McCanns need to have the abduction occur only at 9:15 p.m., when Jerry's whereabouts are accounted for by a witness, his tennis partner, Jeremy Wilkins? In fact, the only way the McCanns are grudgingly willing to accept the 10 p.m. sighting as the abductor carrying Madeleine is if it's the same man that was seen earlier at 9:15. If he is a very, very slow walker or he stopped off in an alley for a rest, well, okay, and then showed up just at the time the Smiths were leaving the bar to be seen by them all, well, maybe it's the same man. But, of course, we know this just makes no sense at all. But for those who have followed the case for years, you might remember that Andy Redwood popped up on Crime Watch years later, claiming the sighting by Jane Tanner had been verified, that this man carrying the child was a tourist who had picked up his daughter from the creche and was carrying her back to his vacation apartment. The only problem here is that he was walking in the wrong direction. Redwood also claimed the man still had the clothes he was wearing that night, and he also still had the clothes his daughter wore that night, some 6 years later. That story is even more ridiculous than the story of Jane Tanner. Why did it become necessary for Redwood to identify Tanner Man as a tourist? One can only guess. Maybe at that point in time, it was important to prove Jane Tanner and the McCanns were not lying about the events of that evening. Redwood then pushed to focus on the Smith sighting as the abductor, but then reminded everybody that it wasn't Jerry. How the McCanns felt about losing Jerry's alibi for the time Madeleine might have been carried away, we may never know. I have a link you can find in the description, and the link is called How Bundle Man Became Real. This is about Redwood's verification of the Jane Tanner sighting. In this profiler's opinion, families of missing children will dog just about any sighting, even one that is not very sensible. The McCanns should have been pushing the police to check out the Smith sighting because, after all, if they're wrong about the bedroom door being opened more widely at 2 different times and wrong about the feeling Jerry had about the abductor lurking in the apartment when he was making his check, it is far more reasonable for Madeleine to have been abducted between Matt and Kate's check and be exactly in the right place to be seen by the Smiths around 10 p.m. The only logical reason they would balk at the Smith sighting is if, indeed, the Smiths saw Jerry carrying Madeleine off in the direction of the beach. As to the search dogs which follow live people's scent, they never followed a trail in the direction that Jane Tanner claims the kidnapper walked, and they also didn't hit on the area the Smiths said they saw someone. They only tracked Madeleine's scent, if that was her scent on the towel, around the block to the parking lot about 400 feet away, in front of a store Jerry had gone to earlier to buy wine, and there the scent stopped or doubled back to the apartment. This scene would have had to have been from a living Madeleine, not a dead one, as this is what search dogs track. Either the trail was from earlier when Madeleine was out and about with Mom and Dad, or the abductor took Madeleine to the store parking lot and then a car took her away, or the dogs just got confused and lost the scent. Interestingly, Kate shows no interest in this scent trail at all and makes no scenario up of a child abductor carrying Madeleine to that spot and handing her off to someone in a car. As a matter of fact, Kate glosses over any search dogs used, and in her book doesn't even mention to where they tracked her scent. Perhaps they never did find any scent, or perhaps they did go to the store parking lot. Maybe Kate ignores this because it doesn't support Jane Tanner's story of the man walking off with Madeleine at 9:15ish. If Kate doesn't think that the dogs tracked Madeleine's scent as she was being carried off by an abductor, then maybe she knows something, like the scent was from an earlier time, perhaps that afternoon or the day before, and perhaps she knows the last time Madeleine left the apartment, she was carried out dead. Since search dogs don't pick up on scents from a person who is dead, this is a strong proof that Madeleine died in the apartment that night. If this scenario occurred, the timeline would look more like this. 7 to 7:30 p.m., Madeleine falls and dies behind the sofa. 9:10 p.m., Jerry goes to the apartment, chats with Jeremy, and then goes in and finds Madeleine. 9:35 p.m., Kate wonders what is taking Jerry so long, and Matt, and possibly Russell, says he'll find out what's up and drops by the apartment to find Jerry with a dead Madeleine. 9:45 to 10 p.m., Jerry takes Madeleine's body off to the beach to hide it. Matt goes back to the tapestry to tell Kate everything is okay. What he would have said about Jerry is a mystery. Russell remains to clean up and push the sofa back. 10 o'clock p.m., Jerry carries Madeleine toward the beach area and is seen by the Smiths. Kate does her check and finds Madeleine gone. She goes to the tapestry to raise the alarm. Jerry may have arrived back at that time, or perhaps just as they were going to the apartment or starting the search. Jerry tells Kate and friends what really happened. Kate goes out on the veranda, banging her arms in hysteria and shouting, "They've taken her, they've taken her." Whether Kate actually said this or not, I'm not sure, as the reports are a bit hazy. Some people believe this indicates Kate and Jerry were in a pedophile ring and that they knew who took her, but I find no validity to this theory. 10:15 to 10:40, a decision is made on what to tell the police. A window is open to support the abduction theory. Jane will say she saw someone around 10:15 p.m. carrying a child. Matt will say he did the 9:30 check, and all will say Jerry came right back from his check at 9:10 p.m. These are all fairly simple statements that don't require much lying at all. Part 8. Where is Madeleine's body? Kate writes in her book that Jerry and David went out in the dark in the early morning hours searching for Madeleine, and she and Jerry went out searching as the sun rose. It seems both times the beach was included as a search destination, leading me to believe the original hiding place of Madeleine's body must be somewhere along the beach or up into the cliffs above. Jerry may have placed Maddie somewhere along the beach and then went back to move her higher onto the cliffs, where the searchers would not quickly find her. Speaking of the cliffs, it is in this remote place that I think Madeleine's body might have remained until it was moved later on to a more permanent, secluded location. Now, what evidence is there that points to the cliffs above the town as a hiding place for Madeleine's body, and why If her body was there, would it have been moved in later months when the McCanns had a rental car available for transporting the body? It is Kate herself that led me to the following theories. Statements in her books are intriguing and caught my attention. I kept wondering where, if the McCanns were involved in the disappearance of Madeleine, could they have taken her body immediately without a car and in a town with few good places to hide a body, a town they were not very familiar with. In most crimes, when someone is dumping a body, they pick an area they know well, an area in which they believe they won't be seen getting rid of a body, an area they don't believe will be searched for a long, long time, if ever. Or if it is found quickly, they can hope the police will believe an abductor left the body there. So I wondered, is there any place around Praia da Luz that the McCanns knew well and felt was secluded enough to hide Madeleine's body and that the police would not discover too quickly? And if they found such a place, would there ever have been a reason to unearth the body and move it? I found interesting answers in Kate's book, Madeleine. She writes the following. 1. A lady from an apartment across Rua Dr. Gentile Martins, overlooking our little side gate, came over to speak to us. She said that the previous night she had seen a car going up the Roca Negra, the black volcanic cliff that dominates the village. There was a track leading to the Roca Negra, but nobody remembered ever having noticed any vehicle that far up in the daytime, let alone at night. This immediately conjured visions of Madeleine being disposed of somewhere on the overhanging cliff. I went to tell one of the police officers who was able to speak a little English. He was quite dismissive. It would have been one of the GNR men checking the area, he said. Page 94. 2. I also felt a compulsion to run up to the top of the Roca Negra. Page 105. 3. Was crying out that I could see Madeleine lying, cold and mottled on a big gray stone slab. Page 105. 4. I remember speeding along the beach, concentrating totally on Madeleine. I had a picture of her in my hand, which I would squeeze when I felt tired to spur me on, especially going up the sharply rising Rua de Praia. Page 132. 5. That first weekend, I felt a burning desire to run up the Roca Negra, and Jerry and I would in fact do so many times over the next few months. Page 133. 6. On or about July 18th, Danny Krugel, on whom we had irrationally hung so much hope, had produced a report for the PJ based on his findings. His machine had recorded a static signal from an area around the beach, close to or on the Roca Negra cliff. Although this included villas, apartments, and other buildings, the implications of the static signal was that Madeleine was most likely to be dead and buried there. Page 200. Page number 7. On or around July 20th. The UK team had been instructed by the PJ to proceed on the basis that Madeleine had been killed and her body dumped. They will be using GPR, ground-penetrating radar. That's on page 200. The search would encompass the land identified by Danny Krugel. That's page 201. 8. On or about July 23rd, I began to worry that perhaps they had some more solid lead that supported Danny's theory. I hoped to God I was wrong. The next day, Bill Henderson rang to say the PJ had deferred the search until the following week, page 204. So, would the McCanns have used the cliffs of the Roca Negra to hide Madeleine's body? And would Kate's fears and the arrival of the dogs have pushed them to move Maddie's body to another location? Although at times it did seem like she just wanted Maddie's body to be found and to end the whole nightmare, that perhaps enough time had passed that she and Jerry wouldn't be linked to her death and burial. First of all, let's examine the use of the cliffs. The McCanns were familiar with the cliffs that came down to the beach. They spent time on the beach in that area. If one needed to quickly hide the body of a child around 10 p.m., there were quick locations to secrete the corpse, like under a fishing boat on the beach. Later, when the McCanns went to search the beach area, they could have moved her body to a better location. On those cliffs coming down to the beach, there are gullies that are easy to climb up in a minute or two. By placing the little body in the gully, the loose rocks are easy to use as a cover. Although I cannot prove this is a location where Madeleine's body might have been placed that night, it is the easiest place I could find. Interestingly, there is also a parking lot just a dozen or so feet away from that location that would make it easy to unearth the body and quickly bring it to the car and place the body in the boot. I have a link in the description below. It is about moving bodies, and there are photos there which you can see that will help explain this more clearly. The following week, on August 3rd, the McCanns made the trip to Huelva, Spain. Then came the ground search of the area and the Roja Negra cliffs, and the sniffer dogs were brought in, which detected the scent of a corpse in the McCanns' apartment and in the rental car they had just driven to Huelva. The McCanns became arguidos and then left Portugal. Madeleine's body may be in Huelva, Spain, as some believe, or her body may be in a location I found just west of Praia da Luz and just north of Budens. I was particularly interested in the activities of the McCanns in the days before the Huelva trip, when Jerry's phone pinged repeatedly in an area to the west of Praia da Luz along the road to Budens, Estre EN 125. I also found it interesting that the day he was to leave for Huelva, he was not feeling well, having a bit of an upset stomach. This led me to theorize he might have used that day to move the body or to recover from moving it the day before. I decided when I got to Praia da Luz, I would take a trip down that road to the west and see whether there were any suitable places to lose a body forever. I found a location just off the road, a very large, desolate place called Monte do José Mestre. Till this day, it remains an area of dirt and brush where a shallow grave would likely remain undisturbed, barring the area being sold to developers and machines unearthing a child's body, perhaps in a missing sports bag. Here, there is a link in the description to this, with photos as well, for this location of Monte José de Mestre. And you'll see it's a very huge area and very easy to access off of that road. Some people say that it's too hard a dirt to dig into, but I don't know because I didn't actually try to bury any body there. But it's just a theory, a possibility of where, based on the phone pings and the time they had the vehicle, where I think it's a reasonable location. And I do not stand by that as an absolute, but you know, there's so many possibilities, but that's the most interesting place I found. Part 9. The post-crime behaviors of the McCanns and friends. The post-crime behaviors of persons of interest cannot be ignored, in spite of Kate's anger at having her every move analyzed and dissected. Post-crime behaviors very often are part of the evidence police and profilers review to determine if someone is likely or not so likely to have committed a crime. Certainly, Casey Anthony, on trial in Florida for the murder of her daughter Kaylee, had a mountain of post-crime behavior that supported the prosecution's claim that only a psychopath who had murdered her own child could act in such a fashion. Not looking for Kaylee, going shopping and partying after the little girl went missing, and continued to behave in an appalling manner even after her little girl's body was found. The McCanns claim they don't want to have their behavior analyzed, yet they did massive numbers of television and radio interviews. Jerry started a daily blog, and Kate kept a diary that she clearly knew could become evidence, and she wrote a book. In fact, they have the highest media presence I've ever seen in a missing persons case, and have received more publicity than any other missing child case I've ever encountered. Furthermore, they do things which draw criticism, such as accepting money, a lot of money, through an organization set up as a business and not a charity. They have never accounted for the expenditures of the money they received. Also, they have been involved in efforts to discredit the PJ, and they sued Amaral and got an injunction to block his book from being read. While they claim the book is libelous, I have read the book and view it as one detective's opinion of the evidence, and certainly, while I am sure the McCanns are not happy with his conclusions, I see it as his opinion and a discussion of the case. They did the same to me, even though Jerry stated it was okay to, quote, purport a theory. I guess it depends what the theory is. Fortunately, Gonçalo Amaral ended up winning in the Portugal Supreme Court and the European Court of Human Rights, and his book was finally returned to market. However, the damage done to Amaral in his life was tremendous. Was the McCanns' reaction to Amaral normal? Well, certainly no parent likes to be considered a suspect in the death of their child, but as is well known, relatives are always looked at first in such cases because quite often the child is killed by family and not strangers. In the case of Madeleine McCann, the police actually gave them a break in the beginning, focusing on Madeleine's disappearance as an abduction, only later coming to believe that the McCanns may have been involved in the death of their child and covered up the crime. What do experts suggest to parents if they are considered suspects or persons of interest? Almost all, well, most everyone with the exception of defense lawyers, will encourage innocent parents to cooperate with the police in order to quickly eliminate themselves as suspects and shift the focus of the investigation in the direction of a stranger. They will suggest they answer each and every question and take a polygraph to verify that what they are saying is true. What happened in the McCann's case? Well, certainly no one has taken a polygraph, not the McCanns nor any of their friends. And when they were declared arguidos, suspects, only Jerry answered questions. Kate refused to answer any. Then they left the country of Portugal and have not cooperated with the police in doing a crime reenactment, nor does it seem their friends are willing to do so either. There were many other behaviors that sent up red flags and caused people to question the McCann's involvement. For example, right after Madeleine was found missing, phone calls were made back to quite a few family and friends in England by Jerry, who told them all that Madeleine was abducted. Actually, he said this to his mother-in-law: "It's a disaster." An odd statement to make if a child is kidnapped. Usually that is said when something goes wrong, especially if one is involved in what went wrong. Now, while it is normal to perhaps make one call to inform family, usually the family then makes the other calls because the parent is too distraught and too involved in searching for their child to have to tell the story over and over again. Also, the McCanns and their friends called in the media quite quickly. Not the Portuguese media, but the British media. This might make sense in the days to come, but to call in media outside of Portugal right away is a bit odd. At that point in time, if one believed Madeleine to be abducted by some local, the first fear is that she will be raped and murdered within a short period of time, and one needs to find the man to stop him. At that time of night, you want the police scouring the neighborhood and putting police roadblocks on the roads out of town. Only when this has failed should one think it is necessary to start a wider search, and that then maybe the British media might come in handy. Another oddity that Kate poo-pooed in her book was concerning the McCanns' trip to see the Pope, leaving their twins behind in a city where their sister just got kidnapped. While I can appreciate their desire to see the second-hand man to God, I'm not a Catholic, so I have a bit of trouble understanding the need to see the Pope as opposed to making a direct prayer to God, and I say this having been to the Vatican and seeing the Pope speak. It is unusual for a parent of a missing child to be willing to be separated from their other children so soon after one of their children is abducted. Usually they stay put or drag the kids along, at least, again, so early on. There were also issues about them going jogging so soon after Madeleine going missing. Now, Kate says she did this to stay healthy and to be able to keep searching and not being emotional during their appeal to the kidnapper. They claimed the police told them not to show emotion. And dressing up as Kate did with earrings and such, something many thought the mother of an abducted child wouldn't even be able to think about. These indeed were some unusual behavior for parents of a recently abducted child. But if the McCanns have a narcissistic personality disorder of any sort, one or both, or a higher level of narcissism than the average person, they may be more focused on themselves and how they look than the average parent of a missing child. Past behavior is the predictor of future behavior. So the McCanns, one or both, simply may be this kind of person to begin with, and their behavior may have more to do with who they are rather than that they already knew Madeleine was dead, that they weren't worried about the twins being kidnapped, and that they were trying to move on. Then again, maybe both issues are at play. Jerry's blog with day-to-day details that seem peculiar for a parent of a missing or murdered child also rubbed many the wrong way, as did his early interest in politics, as though Madeleine was already a moot issue. Let's focus on the future. There are many things Kate and Jerry said and did in the numerous interviews for television and radio that hit people, and me, the wrong way. I have selected just a few of their statements and behaviors that bugged me and led me to believe the police should continue looking at the McCanns as arguidos, suspects. 1. Jerry's statement. We felt our actions were responsible. We were essentially performing our own baby listening service, although we have talked of the guilt we felt at not being there at the moment Madeleine was taken. There are a bunch of things wrong here. First, that Jerry actually still believed, even after losing his daughter, that leaving a young child and a toddler's siblings alone in an apartment out of earshot and eyeshot was responsible behavior. This is a sign of someone who refuses to take responsibility for his actions. The second part of the statement is odd in that if Jerry and Kate were there when an abductor actually picked up Madeleine and made for the door, Madeleine couldn't have been taken, at least not without a fight. On the other hand, if what Jerry is referring to is when Madeleine had an accident or an overdose, then maybe if they had been there when Madeleine was taken from life, they could have used their medical skills to do CPR and bring her back and get her to a hospital. Finally, the word taken is often used to describe the moment a person died. It is an awfully gentle way to say kidnapped, abducted, or stolen. Parents usually do not think kindly in terms of someone who has snatched their child. Yet Jerry and Kate use this word quite often in their interviews. 2. Jerry's statement that he and his wife Kate were 100% confident of each other's innocence. Innocent of what? Being the abductor of their own child? Does this make sense? No, but they may see each other innocent of causing the death of Madeleine if they both believe it was an accident, drug or no drugs. The only other explanation for that statement would be if Jerry did find Madeleine's body and go hide her. It would then be required of Kate to believe her husband's story that he found Madeleine deceased and in no way contributed to her death while making his check on her. 3. When Jerry states that neither he nor Kate gave Madeleine a sedative, he pulls at his ear, which is often a sign that someone is lying. Considering that the two of them later insist the kids were likely drugged, the possibility of one of them doing the drugging, being Kate or Jerry, increases. 4. Kate stating that she had no problem sleeping after the first few days. Finally, in a later interview, her mother said Kate did have difficulty sleeping. In her book, she is very clear that she had problems sleeping. Why did the story change? Likely because someone mentioned that saying one slept through the night while their daughter might be locked up, terrified, crying for her parents, maybe being raped and tortured, that does not come across very well. As a matter of fact, I addressed a letter to Kate in my blog, The Daily Profiler, about the many behaviors that she and Jerry have been exhibiting, which were not making them look too good. And I'm happy to report Kate has explained each and every one of those behaviors in her book, Madeleine, and also has included a lot about the emotions she felt and the behaviors that weren't seen in public view that align totally with average parents of missing children. And in the description, you'll find a link to the letter that I wrote to Kate prior to her book being published. 5. Kate's discussion in her book of her daughter's possibly torn and abused genitals turned a lot of people's stomachs and is not something a mother of an abducted child usually wants to put out in public. 6. Kate and Jerry's incredibly high profile is extremely unusual for parents who are still looking for a missing child, and is more normal when they are working on changing things for all missing and murdered children, in the manner of Mark Class with Class Kids, or John Walsh with America's Most Wanted, or Beth Holloway with her International Safe Travels Foundation, all of whom solicited money and worked to help others, not just their own personal cause. The McCann's organization, which lists as its purpose finding Madeleine McCann and then helping others once it is accomplished, is practically assured to be helping no other children for the next few decades. These are just some of the examples of post-crime behaviors that have supported my theory that the McCanns were somehow involved in the death of Madeleine and that no abduction ever occurred. Part 10. My final profile determinations and recommendations to law enforcement, the McCanns, their friends, and family. This is my theory of what happened to Madeleine McCann that I believe is most supported by the known evidence. 1. Madeleine went missing on May 3, 2007. 2. Madeleine went missing between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening. 3. The emotions of Kate and Jerry McCann were real. They were real, but they were the emotions of a scared person, Kate, at 10 p.m., and 2 devastated parents later that night who knew their child was dead and not coming home. The statement, "We have failed her," and the emotions of defeat and odd kneeling and prostrating behaviors support this. The last person to claim to see Madeleine alive between 8:30 and 10 p.m. that evening was Jerry McCann, and it is likely that Jerry was the one that found and moved Madeleine's body to the beach. 5. It is highly likely that some of the friends, or most of them, knew that Madeleine had died in the apartment and helped Jerry and Kate cover the crime by creating a timeline that gave Jerry an alibi, while finding and moving the body, creating an abductor whose presence coincided with Jerry's alibi of being on the street with Jeremy Wilkins, and perhaps one friend helped with the cleanup, which might have been very minimal if there was only a tiny bit of blood and she died of positional asphyxiation. 6. Madeleine's body may have been hidden in a gully in the cliffs that was accessible from the beach and then moved to another location like Monte de Jose Mestre for a more permanent burial location, one that was less likely to be discovered. 7. The post-crime behaviors of the McCanns appear to support the theory that they knew Madeleine was dead, that they had a role in her death, and that they covered up the crime. 8. The physical evidence does not support an intruder theory, especially the lack of evidence that an intruder opened or came in or out the children's bedroom window. 9. The sniffer dogs detected decomposition and blood in the apartment of the McCanns and detected decomposition in the rental car hired by the McCanns weeks after Madeleine's disappearance. DNA was also found in the rental car that was identified, at least to the satisfaction of some, as Madeleine McCann's. The cadaver dog also hit on Madeleine's cuddle cat, which was found after her disappearance on her bed, yet the dogs did not hit on the bed itself. This makes sense if Madeleine died while clutching her toy behind the sofa where the dogs hit, and the toy was then put back on her bed when her body was removed. 10. The dogs hit on some of Kate's clothes, which could only have occurred if she had contact with Madeleine's body after she was deceased. This would have most likely occurred when Jerry and Kate walked to the beach at sunrise. Kate may have held Madeleine in her arms and said her goodbyes at this time. Following were my recommendations to law enforcement and the McCanns and friends when I originally wrote this profile back in 2011, a time when I believed more could be done with this case. The Madeleine McCann case needs to be reopened and the evidence reanalyzed. The McCanns and their friends need to be re-interviewed. They need to be polygraphed. The crime scene needs to be reenacted. A deductive criminal profiler should be brought in to review all the evidence in detail in a formal criminal profile submitted that will help direct the investigation and point out useful investigative leads. Law enforcement should examine both the abduction theory and the accident/cover-up theory and work to eliminate one as not being supported by evidence. Meanwhile, both avenues of investigation can be followed in order to further the case. As to the McCanns and their friends, I highly encourage you to allow the detectives presently in charge of the investigation to do more thorough interviews and a reenactment. You may be telling the truth, but in such a poor way that you have come off as deceptive instead of honest. If you really want the police to focus on a stranger as a perpetrator of this crime, you need to get yourselves eliminated as suspects. Kate and Jerry McCann, along with being cooperative with the police, I recommend you open your organization up to financial scrutiny and widen its work to focus mostly on some kind of service to help abducted or missing children in some way. Use just a small portion of the proceeds to continue your search for Madeleine. No amount of money is really helpful in finding Madeleine anyway. She has had her photo everywhere and is more known in the world than any other missing child. Also, if you two had nothing to do with Madeleine going missing, then I have to tell you that, barring a miracle, Madeleine is likely no longer alive. The chances of her being abducted into a sex ring are near zero. Sadly, if Madeleine were to have been abducted, she would have been taken by a child sex predator and likely dead within hours. If you are going to hire a private detective agency, be sure you have a profiler analyze the crime first and provide specific areas for the PIs to investigate. Otherwise, they will waste time and money running down every possible lead, no matter how ridiculous it is. What a PI really needs to do, and the PJ, is to go back over everyone within 10 or so blocks of the apartment. It is doubtful an abductor would bother to walk away if he could have parked his car in the car park right at the building, run in, grabbed Madeleine, and driven off quickly. This is a lot less risky than being seen walking block after block with a comatose or sleeping child in your arms, unless you simply have no car available to use. So, the investigation of a stranger ought to be right there in Praia da Luz if you want to find out what happened to Madeleine. And to the McCann's friends, something is not entirely right with your stories, especially yours, Jane Tanner. Please consider being completely honest with the police, even if it means losing a friend or being ashamed or embarrassed over choices you have made in the past. Madeleine deserves to be found, justice needs to be served, and people all over the world who contributed money to the fund have the right to answers. Finally, to the McCanns, law enforcement, those who believe the McCanns are innocent of any wrongdoing, and those who believe they are guilty of some malfeasance, remember that this profile is just one theory and does not prove guilt or innocence of anyone. If anything I offer here helps someone come forth with clear information or evidence which aids in finding Madeleine, her body, or the truth, I am happy to have provided one more document that might help bring closure. Update in 2024 on hope for justice and truth in the Madeleine McCann case. Many believe that there is still a possibility that this case will be further investigated by the Portuguese police, or that Madeleine will be found, or there will be some confession. Although these things are possible, many years have gone by, and it seems with the offering up of rapist Christian Bruckner by the German prosecution, the idea of this crime being an abduction is still being pushed by law enforcement and the media. As of now, no evidence of abduction, nor any evidence linking a stranger to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been found. The chances of the McCanns being charged with the disappearance of Maddie without a body or a link to the body, disposal site, or a confession is near zero, especially since Scotland Yard spent millions on the abduction theory, and that will be pure gold for the McCann defense. But as the years pass, who knows? Maybe someone will unearth her body or finally break down and tell the truth. If this happens, I'll be grateful the truth has finally come out. If it turns out that I'm wrong and Madeleine was actually abducted, I will be incredibly surprised, but I will admit I was wrong in profiling this case. In the long run, we may all have to accept that we will never know the absolute truth. Sometimes that is the way things go in cases of missing or murdered people. I have seen this more often than I would like, and I've come to live with that reality. God bless Gonzalo Amaral and all the people who have tried so hard to find the truth of what happened to Madeleine McCann.